The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
After several attempts to push for agreement on the messy Brexit deal, Theresa May has resigned as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and leader of the Conservative Party. In June 2016, the UK voted to leave the European Union, and then Prime Minister David Cameron resigned. Now, May has also been forced out by Brexit. To help explain the Brexit fiasco, I'm joined by Dawn Riddler of Karenga Wealth Ecology. And Dawn, pleasure to have you with us.
Lovely to see you, Tim.
Well, this Brexit thing seems to be claiming so many politicians' careers in the UK. Why is it such a complicated, messy affair?
I think we need to go right back to when they had the referendum. I frankly don't really think that a lot of the British people really understood what, in fact, they were voting for. You know, and they were either voting on thinking that it was going to stop migration. But, of course, migration from Eastern Europe and that kind of thing is not really the problem. It's the migration from, you know, Northern Africa and places like that that's a problem. And Brexit's not going to solve that. And then it was, you know, trying to get away from the petty bureaucracy and the overrun of expenses and everything.
Things being referred to Brussels and all
yes,
that, which
absolutely.
Taking decisions on themselves,
and it's very costly for the UK to do that. So Theresa May was actually a Remainer. She wasn't a Brexiteer, you know that, but she took on this job, and quite frankly, I think she was handed a poison chalice. You know, she wasn't going to be able to do anything with this, purely because I think she took the approach that she was going to try and do this by reconciliation and by discussion and everything else to implement what the British public wanted. But her MPs didn't play ball, you know. In the UK, they have a very different parliamentary system to what we have here. You have constituencies. You know, it's rather the same way that we worked in the apartheid era. But those MPs have not been voting as per their constituencies. They've been voting as per their personal preferences, and their personal preferences is to remain. So that is how it's become so complicated, which is why I think the only way really to get around this is to have somebody who is going to say the British public voted for Brexit, now we're getting out. And if it's a hard Brexit, it's a hard Brexit.
And there are deadlines, right? They did ask for an extension, but they've been given a few months.
Yeah, well, 31st of October is the absolute deadline. And, I mean, you've probably even heard Boris Johnson saying, you know, that he will go back and talk, you know, if he's voted. And, you know, he's certainly the favourite to lead the party, for good or for bad, whatever it, you know. But I think he has that kind of forceful personality that is needed at this point.
Well, you know, Theresa May is stepping down as Prime Minister, and she's also stepping down as leader of the Conservative Party. So is that where Boris Johnson is coming from? Is emerging as one of the
one of the contenders for that position,
and a stronger one at that.
I think he is. Look, I'm not a huge fan of his, you know, and he doesn't really have enormous credentials, but he does have this charismatic, forceful personality that, you know, I think you've got a better chance of him saying to the MPs, this is what the British people wanted, we're going to deliver it, and if that means a hard Brexit.
The Labour Party seems to be keen on having an election within a short period of time, ahead of that deadline of 31st of October.
Well, you know, I mean, Corbyn, of course he wants another election, because, you know, he came pretty close last time, let's face it. But Brexit is not a partisan issue. You know, there were as many people voting for Labour who voted for Brexit as, you know, so it's not as though voting, you know...
one way or the other is going to change the situation. But let me bring South Africa's interests in all of this, right? And that's where I start by looking at the politics within the UK, just to see who would be friendlier to South Africa's interests. Or, you know, in the scheme of things, it's neither here nor there. What do you think?
You know, if they go the hard Brexit route, we certainly, I think, could win quite substantially, and win what the Europeans are losing. There have been some figures that South Africa could gain as much as 3 billion in trade.
With what? Pounds, rands, or
pounds?
Okay.
Yeah. In trade with that is lost from the UK and that kind of thing, and obviously others like America would also pick up and China would pick up. But we're actually considered fifth in line in terms of being able to pick up business that the European Union is losing. But I think, you know, those businesses that will lose that, you know, revenue are going to fight back really hard against their governments and against the EU so that this doesn't happen, you know. They're not going to just wave goodbye to billions of pounds worth of trade because, you know, fat cats in Brussels, you know, just have...
Well, you are far removed from the situation, but looking at the dynamics, the developments there, from your point of view, being able to look at all the dynamics within the UK itself, including in the EU and the interests of countries such as ours, what do you think is the best outcome?
I think the best outcome would be a negotiated deal where trade still happens, because if there's a hard Brexit, trade is going to stop, and then the WTO, the World Trade Association, rules start to apply. But the thing is that Trump, for example, has, you know, basically completely disregarded the WTO. And there's no reason, quite frankly, why the British can't do the same. And, you know, the thing is that they could, for example, waive all tariffs, which would kind of pull the rug from underneath a lot of the trade problems with the EU and say, right, we're going to have no tariffs. But there would be that sort of delay because now everything has to be inspected as it comes across the border, and when it goes across the border into Europe, it has to be inspected and those kind of things. And then, of course, you know, if there's a negotiated deal, it's the Irish problem that is the biggest problem. This, you know, they don't want a hard border in Ireland, and that is, you know, one of the biggest stumbling blocks. I personally don't think that Boris or anybody's actually going to be able to negotiate a better deal.
Continues to be a mess, I suppose. Don Riddler, thank you very much for having been our guest.
Thanks, Pete.
Hard Brexit, soft Brexit, still Brexit, and the deadline 31st of October. Still ahead, the youth gathered to talk about reclaiming Africa. That's our discussion in a moment.